Good evening, South Africans. The South African President, Mr. Cyril Ramaphosa, has delivered his State of the Nation Address 2021. As all of us have been watching, and we heard the President, in his speech, he had covered a number of points. We will just remind each other 4 of those salient points on which his speech was based on. One of the key points was, how is South Africa going to defeat the scourge of COVID-19? And then the second point that the President highlighted was to how they are going to accelerate economic recovery, because as much as we are aware, South Africa was impacted negatively by the COVID-19. A lot of people lost their businesses, a lot of people lost employment. As we speak, some of the people are closing businesses and also are unemployed. And the third point, how does the country drive sustainable economic growth for everybody? And this we could see in the various places that the President highlighted in this speech. And then finally, how is South Africa fighting corruption? As he mentioned, the Zondo Commission, which has actually exposed and highlighted how the justice system was actually compromised, as per the words of the President. Sibolelo, what is your take on the speech of the President?
I think the President spoke to the most pertinent challenges that the country is facing at the moment, and those 4 priority areas really speak to the crisis areas, or areas that require urgent intervention. So one, the COVID-19 pandemic, as we know, has not only affected South Africa, it has affected the global community at large. So indeed, it is a priority, because it's not just about the health of the people of this country, it is also about the economy. It is about the ability of this country to stay resilient within this context of COVID-19 and come out being able to, being stronger than before. And then thirdly, we're talking about, if we're talking about the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, livelihoods. How do we come out of that? How does the state mitigate, actively continue to mitigate against this negative, this far-reaching impact of the COVID-19 pandemic? And of course, thirdly, the President spoke about accelerating economic recovery, and then the third one as well is implementing economic reforms to create sustainable jobs and livelihoods. These are all of the issues that really affect ordinary South Africans, regardless of color or creed. Even the pandemic itself affects all South Africans, regardless of color or creed.
Indeed. One of the things as well that the President highlighted was actually to acknowledge, as a President, that the vaccine that was delivered, I believe about 2 weeks ago, it was actually not going to assist and protect South Africans against the existing variant that has arisen during the second wave. And he even elaborated on the fact that Johnson & Johnson is already sending 80,000 batches of doses to actually assist the frontline health workers and those that are identified. So what do you think should be the feeling against with the South Africans upon this news?
We can see that the President has got a very difficult task before him. He has the responsibility to be that central point of hope, and ultimately the country is now looking to the President to come up with solutions that will take us forward. Ultimately, we know government has conceded, we couldn't possibly have known. I am sure that, that they couldn't possibly have known that the 1 million batch of AstraZeneca that was coming through might have these limitations and shortcomings. But the 80,000, that is a positive. It shows, obviously, government, the President and the Minister of Health taking responsibility that, despite the conditions, despite the limitations, we see that there is an effort by government to begin to address this issue. And of course, we know COVID-19, it's not just about government availing the vaccine. In the meantime, what do we as South Africans do? What do all of these other sectors do to assist? We are now going to cross over. Yes, we are now witnessing, we're looking at a ceremony, a candlelight ceremony that is taking place within the National Assembly by, obviously attended by members of Parliament who also wanted to pay tribute and homage to the many lives that have been lost to the COVID-19 pandemic since it broke, not only in South Africa, March last year, but countrywide, globally as well. What is your take on the demonstration and what the symbolism thereof to the country and to the people of this country, those who have lost loved ones?
I think it's quite a humbling experience to those families that have lost their loved ones, irrespective in what area of field or family, to just acknowledge that indeed this is not about class, as you indicated earlier on, but we are recognizing the impact of the COVID-19. So even those people who were not able to bury their loved ones, those people who could not see their loved ones in hospitals, but when a national government recognizes that we have lost people, I think it sends a message to say that our parliament, our government does care about South Africans. And earlier on, to the viewers who didn't see the first part of the candlelighting, the president, Mr. Cyril Ramaphosa, as well as the deputy chairperson of the NCOP, Mr. Amos Masondo, as well as the speaker, Mrs. Thandi Modise, they did the candlelighting. So as we see on the screen, the members of parliament are getting ready to do their own bit in recognizing and acknowledging the scourge of the pandemic into the nation.
And indeed, if we're talking about just the impact, the psychological fatigue, the fatigue of the emotional fatigue as well, of staying positive. There's a social, we all have, many South Africans have that fear as well. And I believe what it does, this demonstration, what it symbolizes is that even the leadership is affected by it. And ultimately, if there's that sense of empathy that is demonstrated by the leadership, ultimately I think South Africans can also derive some kind of hope and consolation that indeed the leadership of the country stands with them in this crisis.
Indeed, even the viewers at home must be made aware that even Parliament has not been excluded from experiencing death within the institution. We have had members of Parliament passing away, even staff. Even today we learned that another member of staff as well passed away. So as you said earlier on, this has no class, it has no institution, but all of us are equally affected, irrespective of what we have. And in the conversation, during the week, one of the citizens I was engaging with, he said, you know what, I have everything in my house. I have the best cars, I've got everything, but none of these things could protect my family from the COVID-19. So what we see there is a display of how the nation and everybody in South Africa and across the world is taking this.
Absolutely, I totally agree with that. And also, if we're thinking about just coming back to the issue of taking responsibility, that the President of the Republic can make pronouncements around the vaccine, but ultimately, if we, this is also one of the key messages of the President, if we are going to defeat this pandemic, it will require the participation and the commitment of each and every South African in this country.
I couldn't agree with you more, Sibulelo, because one of the things that the President, when the country went to under lockdown restrictions, level 5, it was so strict, and you could see that it is a way of ensuring that the spread of the pandemic is prevented in as much as possible way that they can. Then we move down to level 3, we'll move down to level 2, all because the President trusted us as a nation that we are going to take responsibility. But then we went back to level 2 because of certain concerns that were being displayed on television, how we suddenly relaxed and forgot our responsibilities of wearing a mask when you leave home, sanitizing and keeping the social distancing. So the issue of taking responsibility is very, very crucial to us as citizens and also as viewers at home, because if we don't take responsibility, we will not be able to stop the scourge of the COVID-19.
Now, how do we begin to unlearn old habits such as wanting to go out into public without a mask and not wanting to social distance. And it's a cultural thing as well among South Africans. We are a people that want to be together. I mean, social gatherings across this country, we know what happens on a Friday, we know what happens on a Saturday, and those are the areas, those are the platforms from where the pandemic was actually beginning to spring up again and spread like wildfire. And that is what they call, obviously, the super spreader events. It's the social gatherings. It's the gatherings on the weekends, on the Fridays, on the Saturdays, and the Sundays. How do we begin to unlearn these habits?
I think one of the things is that what has been happening now is that the Minister of Police has really emphasized that if we break the rules, we are going to be arrested. For an example, what happened in East London, where the owner of a restaurant or a bar allowed young people to go in and party the whole night. That was a super spreader. The regulations are there. The information is there in the media almost every day. We see the marketing of how we need to protect ourselves, how we are being cautioned as citizens. So as you are saying, is that it is our responsibility. We need to learn how to take responsibility, because at the end of the day, everybody goes back to their family. And when you no longer are able to go to the hospital, when a family member is sick, if you contribute to the sickness of your next door neighbor, how do you feel about it? So everything boils down to say it's time we change the old habits. Regarding the lockdown regulations as well, this is not going to be for long. I mean, for a nation that went through apartheid for so many years, how much did we stomach in? So this is just a second year. We don't know how long the COVID-19 is going to be with us. But if we were resilient then, as the president alluded to, and he made an example of us being the fynbos or the protea flower, saying that it needs strong fires to actually come back and be looking better than before. So we as a nation as well in South Africa, we need to just accept that unfortunately this is the part of our lives that we need to be tolerant of until everything settles down. Because life is going to go back to normal, but we just need to hang in there.
Absolutely. You know, there's a president announced, began to talk about the second wave in December before we went into lockdown again. When he issued that warning, he spoke about whether do we want to bury our loved ones? Do we want to have our last Christmas? We are now crossing over to one of our presenters.
Address the issue of the cost of doing business in South Africa, the high labor cost and things, the high energy cost and things, if you want to be competitive with the local manufacturing and for export. The issue of infrastructure development has been going on for a very long time, and a lot of money has been put in for infrastructure development. But I think what the president does not talk about, that the large amounts of money, almost 40% of all money through procurement processes are lost in the country annually as a result of looting, corruption and overpricing and not getting value for money. We were expecting him to say something about them. Now, on the one hand, the president is talking about 430,000 jobs having been created, and I think he's out of touch actually with reality when he says that, because there are lots of them that have been employed that have not even been paid. On the one hand, he's talking about 1.7 million less people are employed at the moment. The unemployment rate has increased to 30.8%, he said. But at the same time, he's talking about 430,000 public sector jobs that were created and another 100 and some odd thousand. So really, I think, you know, the president, particularly I think with his maths, there appears to be a problem. That now very importantly, he speaks about water and sanitation and what we are doing. But I think what he is forgetting about is that municipalities, particularly local authorities, lose up to 45% of the water as a result of poor infrastructure, and those issues need to be dealt with. We spoke about particularly the automotive industry and the investment by Ford Motor Company. I'm not sure where he gets this from, because Isuzu, as far as I'm concerned, have already left the country. But let's look at it in a positive note. If they are, he's talking about that other countries are going to be entering into the automotive market, which is good for South Africa because we will then be able to sell to them accessories and motor parts and things. What I expected to hear is, when is South Africa going to have its own automotive industry, something that we've had many years ago. I expected him to talk about, given the issues and challenges we have with vaccines and things, that South Africa will start looking at trying to manufacture its own vaccine and have its own pharmaceutical industries in the country. So this is what we've expected to see.
Thank you, Mr.
In a nutshell, I can tell you, however, while we welcome some of what the President has said, but overall I think there was really nothing new to it given the difficult circumstances. But I think what is important now is to ensure that we implement what he's talking about.
Thanks a lot, Mr. Sheikh Imam, leader of the NFP. And right now, standing in front of me is the leader of the AIC. We're also taking his reaction. Sir, what is your reaction to the President's address tonight? Do you think it lived up to your expectations?
Thank you very much. You know, the President has just reminded me of a certain preach on the podium who once said that it is in my weakness that I become strong, comparing the burning of this faint boss to diminution of its seeds. No, the President has just touched on all what I expected, because I wanted him to touch on the issue of COVID-19. It did touch on that, but what I expect is that perhaps now the fears of the South African people should be allayed. I didn't see her giving sort of a courage or allaying these fears. Of course, I also expected him now to say something about this vaccine that is said to expire in April this year. I said perhaps now we'll just say something so that now each and everyone will be interested in taking this vaccine, because most of the people are not willing at all to take the vaccine because for the fear, they are just necessary fears. But it did touch on that, and the way sort of now he mentioned this Johnson & Johnson that has got a vaccine to assist us. Also, the President, I wanted him now to say more about the gender-based violence. But now at least there's something that is said. For instance, now, when he mentioned the three legislation that has been passed in order to defend or to protect our women and the killing of children, so that it did well on that score. But I thought perhaps now there's still more to be done, because we want to see now this stopping. Again, now, in the issue of corruption, the President said now corruption has got to be fought against. Yes, but you don't see any results in fighting this corruption. For instance, I was just expecting him to say something on how he's going to fight corruption on these SOEs. Yeah, he did mention that, then trying to say that there are some measures that are put for ESCOM. But it was very much interesting to see that ESCOM would be effective and efficient by 2050. Oh, that's too far. 2050. If he was saying that now, at least now this issue of load shedding is going to come to an end very soon, perhaps I would be very much happy. He did touch on the issue of agriculture. I was happy now when he said agriculture is contributing a lot, is doing well. So that is very good, because it's going to grow the economy of the country. Then, yes.
Thanks a lot. I believe most of these views will find expression during the debate next week. Thank you very much, leader of the AIC. I am now joined by the leader of the ATM. Sir, what is your reaction to the State of the Nation by the President?
Look, we must be honest and say we can't trust this speech. Firstly, it is a repetition of the speeches he's been making since 2018. Now, we're talking about a person who's promised to go to Marikana, did not go. Promised Alexandra 1 million houses, he did not do that. He promised there won't be corruption on PPE procurement. There was corruption even in his office. Therefore, there is no reason for us to actually trust this speech for tonight. And on the issue of ESCOM, you can't be talking about anything else in ESCOM if you want to make sure that ESCOM returns to profitability, if you do not talk about the evergreen contracts, because currently the price per ton, it is close to 1,000 or more than 1,000, whereas the recommended price is like 350 rands. Therefore, without addressing that overpayment that ESCOM is making in some of the contracts, you have not done anything to actually stop load shedding.
He's touched on the economic recovery plan. Do you think he has given much details in terms of how the country can get out of the quagmire that we find ourselves in economically?
He's not said anything because it is not the first time he's talking about an economic recovery plan in response to COVID, but we have not seen any results. And what we need, it is for South Africans to be economically active. It can't be that the fate of South Africans, it is to line and sleep outside post offices for these grants, because South Africans are able, South Africans want to work, they want to own businesses, but he has not provided any tangible practical solution to get South Africans to be economically active. Even his talk about SMMEs, we know that currently more than 80% of government procurement goes to big companies, not SMMEs. Therefore, it would be proper for him to say on the issue of the economic recovery, we have redirected our spending as government. We are spending more on SMMEs instead of large corporates.
Yeah. What else do you think the president should have touched on, particularly on the economic recovery plan, seeing that we are in a very difficult position economically, especially because of the hard lockdown that we've had since the beginning of the pandemic earlier last year?
Look, when you talk about the economic recovery plan now in the days of lockdown and COVID, there needs to be, the priority should be, how do we get people to be healthy, to be able, so that we do not have to close the economy for longer periods, because the economy has been closed for longer periods. Therefore, on the issue of getting South Africans healthy, it can't be that there's only one solution. It is vaccines, whereas there's ivermectins, there's umhlonyane, there's also other indigenous systems that could be used to make sure that we do not have to wait for a vaccine that might arrive in the second quarter, whereas we do have existing solutions. Because what is needed now, it is for people to return to work, it is for life to return to normality, instead of waiting for a vaccine that might come months later. And the issue of the faith-based organizations, they must be allowed to operate, because they also contribute, firstly, to the well-being of the citizens. They contribute again to the economy. Therefore, it can't be that the first point of departure for him, it will be to close churches and hoping that people will be fine being stuck in their homes. They will not have the necessary energy as well as the stress relievers to actually fight COVID, because we know in churches there is a strong focus on actually making sure that mentally and spiritually people are able and they are not killed by stress.
Thank you very much, sir. I believe most of these issues will find expression in your debate next week when we have the SONA debate. Thanks very much for joining us. There you have it. We still have a lot more reactions coming on from different leaders of the political parties, those who are attending the State of the Nation. Sir, what is your reaction to the President's State of the Nation address tonight?
There's nothing new. He's been saying what he has been saying for the past 2-3 years. In fact, he's been saying what has always been said by all other presidents before him. And there's nothing new. It's like a recitation now. As long as the land question is not addressed, there will always be a problem. As long as the economic structure is not changed, a real liberation will remain a pipe dream. So as long as 80% of the land and the economy is still in the hands of the few white people, the real freedom remains a pipe dream.
What do you think from the PAC's perspective could have been broken down by the president as the recovery plan to the ailing economy due to the COVID lockdown that we've had since the beginning of last year?
In fact, the truth is the problem in this country is because of corruption. Now the recovery plan is not even clear how is it going to be done, because the same people who are telling us about the recovery plan are the same people who have been stealing even what was meant for COVID-19. So even the recovery plan remains a pipe dream.
What do you think is missing from the president's address, in your opinion?
It is to tell us exactly how is he going to address the issue of COVID-19. How is he going to address the issue of pandemic? I heard him talking about local businesses that we must support locally, but I did not hear him telling us about local medicines, local herbs, how to address this pandemic. Now, as long as those things are not there, it is not clear how is he going to recover the economy and fight the scourge of COVID-19.
So thank you very much for your feedback. I really believe most of these views from different political parties will be finding expression next week in the SONA debate that we'll be having. But right now I'm joined by the Chief Whip of the majority party in the National Assembly. Ma'am, what is your reaction to the State of the Nation address?
In the morning when I was here, I said I expect 4 to 5 key priority areas from the President. One, the President to account to the nation what transpired after 2020 SONA. And the President has given that full account. And I did not expect that because the year 2020 was characterized by the pandemic, and I thought most of the commitments were not done. But today the President has proven that he was committed and those commitments were implemented. On the issue of corruption and crime, he was spot on. Beyond arresting, prosecution, they must be made to pay back the money, or the fiscal unit must take their assets because we need that money. On the economic reconstruction and recovery plan, that in the past 4 months, we were here when the President tabled the plan. What I was waiting for was the implementation and what progress has been made. The President was very simplistic to say this is what has happened from September to date, and that's a positive contribution that has been made through that economic recovery plan. On the issue of SOEs, I said here in the morning, we cannot be found wanting when it comes to SOEs. The President must crack the whip. The President must read the Riot Act to all the SOEs, and the President have done exactly that. Our role now is to follow up on a clear monitoring tool as Parliament, as we play our oversight, a robust oversight to say, President, you have said this. So what we're going to do now, as ANC caucus in particular, we're going to craft our action plan to follow up on this SONA, to hold the executive accountable. But also was happy about the fight to end gender-based violence and femicide. That government alone cannot be able to discharge that particular mandate, but we need stakeholders. And the President was very clear, who are we working with? Because if we come together as South Africans, we are going to develop our own country. But the fact of the matter is, if we can quickly create jobs, the job seekers out there, the young people are getting impatient, and it is us here in this Parliament that must make it a point that the environment is conducive for those young people to be absorbed on the jobs sector, but also the private and business sector must play their own role. I think I'm very happy. This was an action plan of a type of a SONA, different from other SONAs, but we are holding this SONA in a very trying time, and the President had to rise to the occasion.
You have touched on the matter that is very close to the hearts of many South Africans, the issue of corruption, and Parliament has been criticized heavily for not holding government to account. You've seen what came out of the Zondo Commission. What is Parliament going to do going forward in terms of oversight?
Without being critical of the Zondo Commission, there are 2 or 3 former members of Parliament who went to the Zondo Commission. Therefore, you cannot be painted in the same brush that Parliament has not done its work. Parliament has done its role, has played its role, for the fact that some of the issues that are discussed in Zondo were picked up by portfolio committees. The portfolio committees packaged the reports, reported in the House, and in respect of the separation of powers, those reports were packaged and sent to the executive. So when we have done our work, I will not allow any institution to rubbish Parliament. These members of Parliament, they know how to play an oversight role. They've done that, but the Constitution allows us to move from point A to B. We cannot go to the executive and instruct them what to do. We take a resolution for them to implement. What we're supposed to do now to change, or as a game changer, is to call all members of the executive to say, out of what of each and every report that we have adopted as Parliament, what is that you are doing on this report, and what are the consequence management that you have taken as ministers, as the cabinet. But I will never agree to the negative narrative that the Parliament has failed. We don't know what our work is. We know our work, and members, with due respect, they've played their role.
Thank you very much, ma'am. I believe most of your views and many other views will find expression next week when the SONA debate progresses. We continue with reactions, and I'm now joined by the leader of another political party, Al-Jama, and Good, the leader of Good in Parliament. So what is your reaction to the State of the Nation address as addressed by the President today?
This year's State of the Nation, we could see, compared to last year he put the master plans in place. This year our President is saying to us, we have put the master plans in place, we spoke about it in October month, we're now implementing. We have monitored as Good movement the implementation of certain plans such as the housing sector, the development of housing and human settlements. We've monitored the Department Public Works and Infrastructure, where 987 million rand with the top 100 projects is being implemented currently. We've monitored water and sanitation. We've also monitored the private sector in terms of the motor industry on how things are developing in this country. So we can see that some of the master plans has been implemented, but some of them has not been implemented, and we need to fast track those kind of things. We're happy with the corruption discussions and the mentions that the President has made. You can see he puts the anti-corruption units together, but he needs to stop the corruption. South Africans needs hope. We want to emerge out of this pandemic as a new nation, and as the President has said, let's rise. So we want to rise out of this pandemic as a new nation, but the corruption needs to stop in this country. And the President Cyril Ramaphosa should be the head of stopping those corruption, especially within the ANC. And that is bringing hope to South Africans. If he speaks about the right things, he's implementing the right things. We also talk about the retention of jobs, as well as the pandemic, the vaccines. He's said to us that there's a few things we wanted to hear a little bit more of the rollout of the vaccine. He was touching on it, but we didn't get much detail on the rollout of the vaccine. So I think it was overall a good speech, especially with implementation this year, 2021.
We are under a very difficult period, the hard lockdown that we are in. It's COVID. Do you think, a lot of people are in despair, they've lost their jobs, some are sitting at home not knowing where the next meal will come from. Do you think their aspirations have found expression in the President's address?
To an extent, yes, but to an extent, it's too slow. The implementation is too slow. Like I said, some of them has been implemented, but he has to fast track, or government needs to fast track the master plans of certain sectors so that people can get that hope and feel that there's hope in this country. Currently, many people in South Africa feel that there's no hope because of the corruption that dampens everything. We put up 500 billion rand, half of that money is stolen, and that makes our country anxious. We feel despondent, unemployment, 2.2 million lost their jobs, so we can give more.
Thank you very much, sir. We continue with our reactions, and I am now joined by the leader of ACDP, Reverend Misha, and we just want to quickly get...
Following up on our commitments to the people, making your future work better. Parliament TV, channel 408 on DSTV.
Thank you, Tammy.
All right. I am standing here with Reverend Mushwa, the leader of the African Christian Democratic Party. Reverend, good evening. Your reaction to the State of the Nation, please.
Good evening, sir. I'm sure many political leaders would agree that there is not anything new
that the president said tonight except about the vaccine. What he said about corruption, that we are tired of corruption, we must fight corruption, he said it in the past 2 years. What we want to know is what government is going to do differently so that they can be believed that they are serious about eradicating corruption. You know that the last week or 2 weeks ago, when Brian Molefe was at the Zondo Commission, he said President Ramaphosa is also involved in corruption. So the least that he could have done tonight was to say, even though my name was mentioned, I am not involved in corruption, and I'm ready to appear before the Zondo Commission because Judge Zondo was there himself. So he should have said that, so that people will know that he's definitely not part of it. He again raised the issue of crime. What he said was what people already know. Crime in South Africa is too high, but he didn't say anything about what they are going to do differently this year to make sure that crime is eradicated. We have lost more than 2 million jobs during the hard lockdown. What government is planning to do to ensure that we regain those jobs and we have new investors in the country? He didn't say anything about that, and that's what most people wanted to know in South Africa. You know, Moody's rating agencies 2 weeks ago, or 2 days ago rather, said that they are concerned about the debt that South Africa is in, that if South Africa's economic status does not improve, it means its credit rating will not improve. And if its credit rating is not improving also, it means that next year the debt to GDP is going to be 100%. Now imagine if so much money goes to servicing debt. If so much money goes to servicing debt, then it means that we will not have money for fresh infrastructure, we will not have money for social development. So there's going to be chaos in the country when people realize that government has no money in order to service the provinces that they have made. So we expected much more than what the president gave us tonight, and we are very disappointed that he repeated what he has been saying all these years except for Corona. But regarding Corona, maybe the last thing I should mention is that the ACDP has always said, let us be transparent and be fair to people, because you know that when you go to a clinic, when you go to a pharmacy or chemist to buy anything, whatever they give you, it has a pamphlet or something is written on the box informing you about the contents of what you are going to take, so that when you take it, you know that you are taking something you agree with. Now, they also mentioned the issue of what the reactions are going to be, side effects are going to be, so that when you choose to take whatever they give you, it will be from an informed position. They don't want to say anything about that, and that concerns the ACDP very much.
Reverend, thank you very much for joining us at Parliament TV. We are continuing with our interviews, reactions to the State of the Nations, and I am now joined by the leader of the Freedom Front Plus. Good evening, sir. Your reaction to the State of the Nation address, please.
Good evening. Firstly, I want to start by saying that it is quite clear that the President is still in a dream world. He's talking about smart cities, and that is proof that he's totally out of touch with ordinary citizens in South Africa who are unemployed, who struggled and is barely surviving the COVID-19 regulations and the handling of the pandemic by the ANC government. I said that I would like to hear, and I was expecting to have detail as far as the economy is concerned, as far as the vaccination program is concerned on the COVID-19 issue. I didn't hear that. The President, for instance, referred to infrastructure constructions and rebuilding in the reconstruction and rebuilding program on the economy. And that's not the first time he said that. He said that how many times? He referred to local production. In 2019, in the February State of the Nation address, he told all South Africans that he is wearing a suit on that occasion that's locally produced. So we are still there, yes, and he has used the word must so many times. We must do this, we must do that. It's true, it must be done, but I don't see that it is happening. That's part of the problem. And he has mentioned some issues as far as the rebuilding and reconstruction of the economy. The fact of the matter is, by still continuing with expropriation without compensation, still putting emphasis on black economic empowerment, is actually destroying all that programs, because investors don't want to hear that. He, for instance, mentioned how easily you can register a company. Just like that, he said. That's part of the problem. Hundreds and thousands of companies are registered just like that, and then they tender for the rollout program of the COVID-19 vaccination program. There was one person who registered the company, a black person, and he said, well, he has got nothing, he's not even got a fridge. But yes, he wants to tender. That's part of the problem. As long as he continue with that, he put the emphasis there, it is a problem. What I want to say, and that is that he referred to the fyn bos, and that a fire can destroy the fyn bos, but it will survive and resurrect it again. The fact of the matter is, the fire that destroyed South Africa is the ANC government that allowed the looting and the stealing of taxpayers' money. And the only way we can recover is that we have an election and the people can get rid of the ANC government.
Thank you very much, sir, for your reaction. We are still continuing with our reaction to the 2021 State of the Nation address. And with me is the leader of Ultrama. Good day, sir, and your reaction, please.
Oh yeah, I'm very happy that the President is pushing further with the economic recovery plan. And what is very interesting is that the President has said that black economic empowerment will stay, but he qualified it by saying that he wants owners to transfer ownership to their workers. And I think that is a significant change in taking black economic power forward, because we can't continue to have an economy that is dominated by whites. We have to bring in blacks into the economy. Very disappointed about the fact that there's no progress with regard to Eskom, and that will be a further shortage, and the President is now relying on other sources of energy and wind power. And I was just thinking, if South Africa doesn't have any wind for a year, what is going to happen? So that doesn't give us confidence. There is a trust deficit with regard to COVID. The President did not think through the rollout properly, and we're now sitting with a very good vaccine, but that doesn't work in South Africa. Whether the Johnson & Johnson vaccine will work in South Africa, we'll only know when it arrives in a week's time, and then we'll have to wait 2 weeks to find out if our scientists are happy with the vaccine. So that means what I'm very disappointed is the President should have announced strengthening of the disaster regulations, especially with regard to reducing alcohol trading hours. He should have done that, and he did not do it.
Mr. Hendrik, thank you very much for your reaction. It was indeed a pleasure talking to you. You are still watching the reactions from Parliament TV, Channel 408 on DSTV. And with me is the spokesperson of the Democratic Alliance, Ms. Ngwenya. Ms. Ngwenya, your reaction to the President's State of the Nation, please.
Ms. Kwahube. Yeah, I mean, I think there were a number of things. I think we need to delineate what was good, what is to be welcomed, and what were some of the pitfalls. The one thing that we do welcome as a Democratic Alliance is obviously the extension of the COVID-19 grant. There are a number of people, there are millions of South Africans whose future or the difference between getting a meal or not depends on that grant. And so we welcome the extension, albeit it's for 3 months. The reality is that at the very least, there will be people who will be catered for. However, we were deeply disappointed by the lack of details around the vaccine rollout plan. The reality is that South Africans were expecting the President to make some pronouncements around when are we getting vaccines, considering the revelations that we found out this week about the efficacy of the AstraZeneca vaccine. And the reality is that the 80,000 doses that we're receiving next week are not nearly enough, and there's still no concrete timelines, there's still no detail. And that's why, as the Democratic Alliance, we are still of the view that the president should table a workable plan to which we can hold him to account. And then lastly, I mean, I think then the issue around corruption, that was something that we were expecting a lot more vigor from the president from, because particularly as we've seen some of the revelations coming out of the Zondo Commission, there were things that there are people within the president's cabinet who have been implicated. There have been revelations that are groundbreaking which have come out. And so surely then it would have been incumbent as him as the head of state to say even members of my own executive who are found guilty of corruption will face jail time. But that wasn't forthcoming. And that's a deep problem. And again, it's not gleeful, it's just deeply disappointing.
Ma'am, thank you very much for your reaction, and thank you very much for talking to us. We are still continuing with our reactions from the members of parliament, and with me is the chairperson of the Standing Committee on Appropriations and a member of the Inkatha Freedom Party. Good day, sir. Your reaction to the State of the Nation address, please.
For the record, I'm responding both the IFP because I want to be compartmentalized by the committee issues. We will deal with those at the appropriate time. But tonight for the IFP, really, in as much as we want to give the president our fullest support in terms of taking the country forward, it was very thin on detail. And it felt as though we were in 2019, 2020. We had heard all of this before. It was a rehash. And then, of course, taking us to issues which are quite concerning, which speak an admission of the shortcomings and failings in the state's machinery. You are speaking about a water agency, but you've got water boards, you've got a Department of Water and Sanitation. So the continued nationalization of the state when there has been an active demonstration of failure to manage SOEs is what is crippling this country. Secondly, we remain fundamentally concerned at the issue of jobs. The President spoke in glowing terms about an economy that seemed to be booming, but the daily lived realities of our people are poverty, is joblessness, and that is attested by the fact that there has to be an extension of TERS and the 350 rands payouts. So all in all, we're asking ourselves, why is the President not addressing the elephant in the room? SAA, for an example, he spoke in glowing terms about energy, but we are in the middle of load shedding as we speak right now. The only reason why there's no load shedding today is because of Sona. Had it been any other night, ordinary South Africans, ordinary businesses would have had to bear the brutal brunt of the incompetence, failure and collapse of Eskom. And so all in all, the President really have to take a step back and reflect as to whether the noble intentions upon which he was elected on are gaining traction within government and within the ANC. But as things stand now, we are not convinced of that. The how is not there. One mention of the NDP, supposedly the blueprint of government and governance in this country. All those things combined are from. But let's give credit as well. He spoke very thoroughly and convincingly and explained in details the issues of the vaccine. Now the taste of the pudding is in the eating. It's incumbent on all of us to support that vision. Finally, the President makes a clarion call for collaboration, and we fully agree with him that the problems that South Africa is faced with require all of us to put shoulder to the wheel, but he has to walk his talk. The question becomes, why has he abandoned the meetings he was holding with opposition party leaders or opposition parties at the start of the lockdown and the pandemic? It's fast absent now. This requires a national effort, which we are all committed to actually putting ourselves to. And so we want to make a clarion call to say, Mr. President, we want to support you. Don't keep us at arm's length. And where you do the right things, you can be assured of our support. And where we find you inconsistent with the Constitution or the collective dreams, hopes and aspirations of South Africans, will surely hold you accountable. But this is also an invitation from us to say, open the discussions again.
Mr. Hlengwa, thank you very much for talking to us. Viewers at home, just to clarify, Mr. Hlengwa was talking to us in his capacity as a member of the Inkatha Freedom Party. And joining me now is my colleague, Shihla Mariso. It's been a long day. We've been doing this. Do you have any reactions to the State of the Nation address?
It has been a long day indeed, and we have seen the reactions from different political parties. It has been a very difficult one. They have varying views on the state of the nation itself, and we do believe that these views are going to find expression in the reactions when the SONA debate sits next week, and we really are looking forward to all of that. But from us here outside the Parliament precinct, we are heading back to the studio. It's good night from us.
Thank you very much, Sihla Mariso and Tembinkosi, for getting us those comments and feedback from the members, obviously on the State of the Nation address. As we know, the President of the Republic delivered his all-important State of the Nation address at 7 o'clock this evening. As we continue with our conversation and just comments on the key points, the key focus areas of the President's State of the Nation address, one of the first issues that we discussed was the issue of the impact of COVID-19 on the country, and as well as the President's program of action in relation to addressing issues relating to the COVID-19 pandemic. The President also made some announcements in relation to what plans are now underway to address the issue of the AstraZeneca, the fact that it's not going to be an effective option anymore. What can you give us a little bit of detail about those announcements?
Yeah, indeed, Sebo, indeed. What the President also highlighted, because in the absence of no longer rolling out the AstraZeneca. What is happening now is that they are going to bring in vaccine doses that are going to protect the South Africans from the pandemic. I will not going to elaborate a lot, but just to indicate that Johnson & Johnson actually is going to deliver to South Africa 9 million vaccine doses. And then we have another global company, COVAX, that is going to deliver 12 million vaccine doses. So in total, we are having quite a number of doses that will be delivered in the country, even though we are expecting about 500,000 within the next 4 weeks. So there is going to be progress. And he did allude to the fact that the provinces actually already have plans as to how the rollout is going to happen within the provinces. So much as the details as to how the rollouts are going to be in the provinces, but I think there should be comfort in citizens to understand that actually after the other vaccine doses have been withheld, then it means that the government is doing something to quicken the spread of the virus or the protection of the new variant that has come across.
That is an absolutely substantive number in relation to the 1 million that came through, the AstraZeneca that obviously has now been found to not be effective. But if we look at the numbers in relation to the millions that we'll be receiving in terms of the vaccine doses, even if it's going to take a few weeks, but we know that there's a plan, a definite commitment and a plan in place to ensure that those vaccines do come to the country so that the country can be able to mitigate effectively.
Indeed.
But at the same time, when we're talking about mitigating and citizen responsibility, those numbers, it doesn't necessarily cover everybody. And we know that there's certain categories of people that will be able to, who will be more susceptible, and it's people who have underlying conditions. So obviously, government has already indicated who are the people who are at risk. And if we look at the numbers that has been put in terms of the announcements of the President, we do know that it is a sound plan. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, definitely it is, because you remember the President, when he was busy giving us these details in terms of the numbers of the vaccine doses that are coming, he also recognized that the government has made mistakes. So everybody, and even for government, this is a learning progress, a learning phase for everybody to acknowledge that yes, we will be making mistakes. It may not be enough, and also maybe some other people may not respond very well to the treatment. So I think at this stage, it would be fair to say that let us accept and monitor what is happening. but at least government is doing something to ensure that citizens are safe.
Absolutely, and this evening's State of the Nation address, I believe, will probably be remembered as one of the most significant, particularly due to the fact that the COVID-19 pandemic has hit not only South Africa but the global community. But another very important aspect of the speech was on the President's response or report back around the economic reconstruction and recovery plan. And the President did speak to one key component that I think is very important. It is the intervention to bring massive increase in local production and to ensure that that markets are created across the globe for quality products that are being manufactured in the country and then sent out into the global market. But ultimately, when we look at the report that was given by the President, we see that there is progress in terms of implementing the economic reconstruction and recovery plan, which is indeed encouraging.
That is very true. Because when we look at the textile and the leather plan that they have in order to make sure that they recover everything, it has been mentioned about they want to increase imports by 40%. I think we cannot cover everything,
Absolutely.
but at least the citizens are aware, especially about the issues that pertain to how the president or government is going to address the issue of the COVID-19 pandemic, because I think it touches almost everybody.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think that's where we'll have to leave it for now.
Definitely.
And of course, we know that there's still the debate that's coming up next week, and of course the President's reply to the State of the Nation address debate. Viewers at home, it has been wonderful staying with you. It has been absolutely an experience to start the morning with you and to keep you engaged and to try and get you the information that you need in anticipation of the President's all-important State of the Nation address. Thank you very much for staying with us. Do stay tuned next week where we will pick up again this conversation around the debate.
Thank you, Sibo. Viewers at home, thank you so much. We do appreciate that you have been with us since 9 o'clock this morning. We have brought a lot of information to you, and we do believe that it might be helpful to understand what has been happening, and most critically is to also know that you have an oversight role over what the President has said. And before we close, we just want to say thank you to the crew, thank you to the presenters, and thank you to everybody who ensured that this production went as smoothly as possible, and would like to say good night to everyone. I'm Valerie Dambuza, signing off from DSTV channel 408.
Following up on our commitments to the people, making your future work better. Parliament TV, channel 408 on DSTV.
Speaker of the National Assembly, Chairperson of the National Council of Provinces, President of the Republic of South Africa,